Welcome to this installment of the Virginia Opioid Abatement Authority's Abatement Academy. Our topic this morning is on separating myth from reality, addressing liability questions around the administration of naloxone. We are very pleased to be joined by three experts this morning who will be presenting, and I'm going to introduce them briefly. And if each of our panelists will please wave when I announce your name. The first speaker this morning will be Mr. Tim Spencer, who is the Roanoke City Attorney and is a member of the Opioid Abatement Authority's Board of Directors. And so thank you, Tim, for carving out time this morning to be with us. Tim has a lot of expertise, particularly on the liability aspects and what the code allows for first responders and lay responders administering naloxone. Our next speaker will be Ms. Tiana Vazques with the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Development Services, and she is the queen of the Revive program, which is the training program for lay responders administering naloxone across the state. And so we're very pleased to have her with us this morning. And finally, we have Ms. Stephanie Diaz from the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police. And she's going to, as far as being the third presenter, she's going to help put it all together in terms of policies that exist, protections for both law enforcement, first responders, and the general public in responding to overdoses. And so, again, thank you to the panelists for your participation. I've listed on the screen for the attendees their names, affiliations, and email addresses if you have follow-up questions. Just a housekeeping item for all of our attendees. This session is recorded, and the reason we record it is because there's a lot of folks that just can't make it. Their schedule doesn't allow them to attend live, so we post the recording or a link to the recording and the presentation on the OAA website. That usually takes a day or two to happen, and then we send out an email to everyone who is registered, letting you know that the recording and the presentation is available, so you can download those and watch or review at your pleasure. The session lasts until noon. The presenters typically speak for about 45 minutes, and so we allow time for Q&A. We ask that you hold your questions until later towards the end of the hour, and then put them into the Q&A feature where you'll type your questions in, and then I will act as moderator to pose those questions for our presenters. So with that as a welcome and an overview, I'll turn it over to Mr. Spencer.
Good morning. How are you doing? Real quickly, just to give you a general idea of what we're looking to cover is we're trying to address a lot of concerns that might have been raised about first responders' utilization of naloxone and the liability that may be associated with that use. I hope that the goal is that after you hear me go through a lot of the legal things, that you will realize that there are multiple levels of protections for first responders. And that in general, the Virginia law is set up to protect police officers and first responders from civil liability when they administer naloxone in good faith. And we'll talk a little bit about what good faith means in a good faith effort to save someone's life, provided they've undergone the appropriate training. Now, that part is where Tiana Vazques and Ms. Diaz come in, because there's some great training out there. And if you have any questions on some policies, there are some great police policies that they've helped craft out there. City of Alexandria comes to mind right off the bat. So let's get started and look at, in general, next slide, proof training is required that the Virginia Association of Chiefs, and that Chiefs of Police, they've managed the first responder naloxone grant program. And that's where Stephanie will come in. And that police officers, like everything in Virginia, we defined it in our code, and there you see the code section under 9.1-101. And if they complete that approved training, then they can administer naloxone and they won't be subject to civil liability. And there are two code sections there. One is specific, but the other one that we'll focus on and go next is under 8.01-225. And this we call the Good Samaritan Law. And there's a lot of states have adopted Good Samaritan laws. And the general public purpose behind that is that you want people to take the risk of trying to save a life, because the benefit of that is far greater than anything that might happen adversely. So if we can go to the next slide, please. And here under Virginia Code Section 8.01-225, it states that police officers, first responders who in good faith, again, we'll talk a little bit more about good faith, administer naloxone in an emergency to an individual who is believed to be experiencing or about to experience a life-threatening opioid overdose, they're going to be immune. And this immunity is a very broad immunity. And that's very important. This is liable to be your first and strongest line of defense if something were to happen and you were to be have a suit filed against you civilly. What this protects and what good faith means, and then if you're operating in an emergency, this is going to protect you unless the act or admission was a result of gross negligence or a willful misconduct. And I would suggest to you that it has to get to the level of willful misconduct. I believe that, and we'll talk about the Stutes decision out of the Supreme Court of Virginia a little bit, that you're going to have greater protection than you believe under this statute. And then, so if we can go to the next slide, please. So we've already had a case dealing with this in the Eastern District of Virginia. And that was Harrison versus Prince William County Police Department. And here, the Eastern District Court, this is a federal court in the Eastern District of Virginia, held that the Good Samaritan statute shields individuals from liability when in good faith they are providing emergency care without compensation. That means for that specific act, not in your general duties of a police officer or a first responder. As long as you're able to do this in good faith, you're going to be fine. And again, we'll talk about good faith. Stutes case, next slide, please. Stutes case that you see here, this dealt with a death. And two paramedics actually, one of the accusations was they refused or failed to provide CPR to resuscitate someone, and they died. There were accusations of gross negligence, but the court found that there was broad protection. Circuit Court actually found there was absolute immunity if you were acting in good faith. Now, on appeal, this is where we'll talk a little bit about good faith. What does it mean by good faith? Now, good faith, as defined in the Stutes case, is very broad. In essence, think of it as the absence of bad faith. Now, what the plaintiffs tried to argue in Stutes was that by being grossly negligent, you were not acting in good faith. And the court said, no, that's not the case. You have to actually act in bad faith. Now, what's an example that I can give in the real world of what bad faith might be? Well, the one I found, you got to go to the extremes a lot of times to show this. Let's say first police officer responds to a call and the person who is in need of naloxone is someone who had an extramarital affair with that officer's wife. And that person says, do not give me naloxone, I'm allergic, it could kill me. And that officer goes, oh, you're getting naloxone all right, and administers it, and he dies. Well, I think that's probably bad faith. You weren't administering it to help the person. You were administering it knowing that the individual had informed you that they had an allergic reaction to it that could kill them. No, that would be bad faith. However, you come across same individual, but there is no relationship and they can't speak. You administer it, and it turns out they're allergic to naloxone and have an adverse reaction. You are going to be protected because you are administering that aid in good faith. You are trying to help the individual. If you boil it down to the most simple language, as long as you're trying to help or aid the individual, you're going to be found to have acted in good faith. And the Supreme Court of Virginia made that very clear in the Stutes case. So that's a good case for first responders and the protections under this statute. Next slide, please. So now let's go into, and this is, some people call it sovereign immunity, some people call it official immunity. The Supreme Court, to distinguish in Patterson versus Danville, started calling it derivative sovereign immunity. Justice Kelsey came up with that to distinguish between the sovereign immunity that lies with the locality that you might work for and the derivative sovereign immunity that benefits the officer. Now, this is based on common law and has been around forever, and that's why I love that quote. The ancient doctrine of sovereign immunity, while often controversial, is alive and well in Virginia. And this actually comes from the common law over from England. And whereas the doctrine of sovereign immunity protects municipalities for liability arising from the exercise of a governmental function, and this can get a little confusing, counties enjoy the benefit of the state's immunity, which is absolute. Municipalities or cities and towns, they have to be performing a governmental act. And life-saving, policing, and fire service are all governmental functions that are covered by sovereign immunity. And then this derivative immunity comes in to protect the officers or the employees of the locality performing those governmental functions. For firefighters, the Massenburg case is the case that specifically held that a locality, the performance of maintaining and operating a fire department is a governmental function. Likewise, going back to 1939, there's a case out of Richmond that held that the maintaining and operating of a police department is a governmental function. And that's reiterated again in the Nice versus City of Alexandria case that you saw. Next slide, please. So Patterson is where they use the term derivative, and that's where it comes in. Now, the derivative sovereign immunity protects an employee who's performing a governmental function from acts of simple negligence, but it does not protect that employee if they've acted in gross negligence. Now, what's gross negligence? Gross negligence, that's where you get into the absence of any efforts. For example, in driving a car, if there's a car accident and someone alleges gross negligence, but you were driving at night, had both hands on the wheel, had your lights on, and you used your turn signal to turn in an intersection, and then there was an accident. The courts have held that cannot be gross negligence. That is simple negligence, and you would be protected for that. if you've had the training and they're administering naloxone and you follow the instructions and something goes wrong, guess what? I'm not telling you every court because lawyers hate absolutes, but this is about as absolute as you could get. You would not be guilty of gross negligence. If anything, I doubt you'd be found guilty of simple negligence, but you would have the protection of derivative sovereign immunity that would prohibit the plaintiff from recovering against you. Now, we go in further and we talk about a locality engaged in a governmental function. It will protect the locality from simple negligence, gross negligence, and even intentional torts. So your employer is protected there, but you will be protected as to simple negligence. Next slide, please. So let's look at qualified immunity. This is only a federal court thing. When qualified immunity comes up, it's a little different animal. This would be in the 1983 claim. And that's where, as long as you're performing, shields governmental employees, including police, from liability in civil lawsuits. Again, we're always talking civil lawsuits on these immunities. In federal court, unless the employee's actions violate a clearly established constitutional right. It has to be clearly established. What does that mean? Typically, that means in the similar fact situation, there's a case out there saying that you can't do this. I will tell you an example that I had to come across where there was, and they had to settle a case. I had a police officer once arrest someone for drunk in public in their own living room. There was no search warrant to come into the living room. And I'm sorry, it was clearly established by case law that you couldn't just come in and arrest someone for drunk in public in their own living room. There is a case out there that says you can't do that. They would not have had qualified immunity. We had to settle that case. But in these instances, dealing with naloxone, more likely than not, you are going to have the protections of qualified immunity if you're sued in federal court. Now, when evaluating qualified immunity applies, you have to consider, the court looks at whether the rights violated are clearly established. It has to be clearly established. As clear as your common sense tells you, of course I can't be arrested in my own living room for drunk in public. I'm in my house. That's my private property. Likewise, all the cases thus far have been supportive of administering naloxone. There is no case out there that's going to say by administering naloxone that you have violated a clearly established constitutional right. You're going to be protected by qualified immunity. Next slide. So, when also looking at qualified immunity, there is the reasonable officer or reasonable paramedic standard. And that's an objective standard. That's not what you think. That's what a reasonable person. If you've gone through the training, guess what? You're going to have acted in accordance with that training, and your actions will be objectively reasonable, and therefore you'll be protected. These factors are satisfied. You as a governmental employee are going to be protected by qualified immunity, and you really don't have anything to worry about. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, let's go over the three protections that you have. You have the protections, which I believe are the strongest, and you can cite this in federal court as well, of the Good Samaritan law. That is going to give you great protection as long as you acted in good faith and that you had the training, you are going to be protected. Also, You're going to be protected by derivative sovereign immunity under the state's common law, and that's going to protect you. And then finally, if you find yourself in federal court, you're also going to have available to you qualified immunity, and that very often will also protect you. So I'm willing to answer any questions. Tony, do you want to do the questions at the very end? Is that what would work best?
Thank you, Tim, for that. I do have one question that's popped up, and
Sure.
we'll try to address this question, and then I would encourage folks to hold your questions till the end because we might wind up addressing it as we go. The question is, to be clear, you should never administer naloxone to a person who is responsive enough to decline. And so I think that's less of a question and more of a comment. And so it's actually it's a good segue because Tiana Vazques from DBHDS is the master trainer and can address that and other items as we transition into her section of the presentation. So thank you, Tim. And Tiana, take it away.
Thank you. I could address that now. I'm going to mention it later again, but obviously if they're able to speak, or if they're talking to you, there's probably no need to administer the naloxone. If anything, I would say don't administer it because you don't want to, quote unquote, waste it, right? Naloxone's money. But also we want to be mindful that naloxone wouldn't cause any harm. So if you did just give them naloxone, it won't cause any harm to them. So it's okay. And I'll talk into that in coming up. But hi, I am Tiana Vazques. I am the Revive Education Specialist with DBHDS, the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. And Revive is our state program. So we can go to the next slide. So our Revive program is built on 3 primary objectives. It's our opioid overdose and naloxone education program, right? So of course, we're going to talk about how do you administer naloxone. This program gives us opportunity to start breaking the stigma when it comes to the stigma associated with substance use disorders, and just to get that conversation going in hopes that we can help just get people involved with being educated and how to help others, but also to help themselves when they are in a situation, right? Because a lot of the times people feel that they can't talk about certain things that they're going through and whatnot, and then they end up, using substances to the max and misusing it. And also naloxone, yeah, it's a medication to help, reverse an opioid overdose. So we're talking about, hey, this is giving people second chances, right? So what do we do from there? So that's what our Revive program looks like. Next slide, please. Again, I'm talking about Revive and whatnot. But basically, it's everything I said. We have a lot when it comes to the fentanyl crisis that's happening. It has been around for a while. It's just unfortunately within the last few years, especially during COVID, we've seen an increase in fatalities when it does come to fentanyl, which is an opioid, overdoses. So unfortunately, that is a thing. So we're going to talk about how do we first identify opioid overdose and what does naloxone do, right? So that's oh, I forgot I had that. You could do the next slide. And this is a slide that I have just to show this is the total number of fatal opioid overdoses by quarter and year of death, starting from 2007 all the way to the second quarter of 2024. And this just puts into perspective, I think we need this visual and why we are having this discussion around naloxone alone, because if you can see the uptick from 2019 to 2020, it's tremendous. And we just kept going up from there. But now we are seeing a downfall. And I feel like that is because of people being educated and knowing what naloxone is and carrying it around and talking more about it. Obviously, overdoses, this is a chart of the fatal opioid overdoses. So overdoses are still happening, but they're not all as fatal as it was before. So we're hoping to see these numbers continue to drop. My goal is let's get it even below where 2007 was, right? But that's a dream. We'll get there eventually. You can do the next slide. So, what is naloxone? We've been talking about this all day. So, naloxone is a medication designed to rapidly reverse opioid overdoses. It's available in 2 FDA-approved formulations as an intramuscular, right, with the needle injectable and the nasal spray. We're going to talk about the nasal spray today because that's the one that we can get over the counter. You can get the intramuscular, but the nasal spray is the easiest to use, and it's honestly just easier to carry as well. Next slide. So how does naloxone work? So naloxone has a stronger affinity to the opioid receptors than the opioid itself. So let's first talk about what opioid overdose is. So we see in this chart, I'm pointing here, like you can see me pointing. We see in this video or picture 3 little opioids, right? Our brain has opioid receptors, and what causes an overdose is when there are too many opioids on our opioid receptors, and unfortunately that causes us to stop breathing, and then it becomes a fatality because guess what, oxygen isn't coming into our brain anymore. So naloxone, what it does, it comes in and knocks off all the opioids off our receptors and allows that person to breathe again. And it only works for about 30 to 90 minutes. But that is enough time for the EMS, emergency first responders, to arrive, and then they do what they have to do. So us as our good Samaritans, that helps us a lot. Next slide. Safety of naloxone. As mentioned before, the serious side effects from naloxone use are rare. So we talk about the example that Tim gave, right? That someone may be allergic to naloxone. That's very rare, but it's important to know what naloxone does because some people might think that the quote unquote side effects are allergic reactions when they're not. So like, let's say if someone is dependent on opioids and we do administer naloxone to them, they will experience acute opioid withdrawal, right? And what does that look like? It could be nausea, vomiting, the sweats, headache, all of these other things. So that's acute opioid withdrawal. Another thing that I love about this naloxone is it has the same dose for an adult as it does for a child. You don't have to think twice. Is it half a pump, 1 pump, 2 pumps? It's the same. And I'll show you guys what that looks like soon. It has no abuse potential. I feel like a lot of times that's a big misconception that it does. And it is important to note that naloxone is strictly for opioid overdoses. It won't help when it comes to alcohol poisoning. It won't help with benzodiazepines, cocaine, amphetamines, or xylazine. I'm not sure how many people have heard about that lately, but that is a thing that has been going around. However, if fentanyl, which a lot of times now it is cut into a lot of stuff, right? So let's say, the illicit drug is a benzo and then they put some fentanyl in it and then someone overdoses, but the cause of it was from the fentanyl, then obviously the naloxone will work. But sometimes we think, how would I know if it was fentanyl in it or not? We don't know. So that's why we say, when in doubt, just give naloxone because it won't cause that many harm. Next slide. I am so sorry, guys. If you could give me a second and I'll put her outside. My apologies. Hold on.
Okay, so while Tiana's doing that, if anybody that's attending has any questions so far, this is a good time with the pause to go ahead and type those into the Q&A, and we can try to address those. Maybe somebody can ask a question just to help fill the blank time. I'll ask a question then for Tim, just to be abundantly clear. If someone has medical training, like an EMT or a paramedic, then all the qualifications that you described, or all of the protections you described, they still apply equally, even though that person has medical training. Is that correct?
That is correct. And in the Stutes case, for example, those were paramedics who had the training, and that protection was available under the Good Samaritan law.
All right, Tiana.
Thank you guys. She was sleeping like an angel and she just woke up with all the energy. So that was my dog. Anyways, so
I thought that was my stomach growling for a minute, but
like Tiana, what's going on? Or Tony. um, okay, so here we are with the steps to respond to opioid overdose. So we can just go on to the next slide because I'm gonna go through them. All right, so first thing we will want to do is check for responsiveness. We will want to try to stimulate the person, which means shouting their name, tap their shoulders, do a sternum rub is a good thing to get a reaction out of them. I don't know how many of us have done CPR classes, but this is very similar to that, trying to get that response from them. We want to check for their breathing because remember, the opioids are on our opioid receptors, affecting our breathing. So either it's going to be really shallow or they're not breathing at all. And we also want to see, hey, is their chest rising or falling? So after we're like, hey, everything's not looking too good, we want to go with our gut, which the next step is to call for help. So the next slide is letting us know, hey, call 911. Just call them. Like, even if you just see someone on the ground, just call 911 and then check everything. As long as we have them on the phone with us, that's most importantly. So if we are in a group setting, this is one of the biggest things I push is to either assign someone to call for help for you, or you take your phone out and give it to them while you tend to the person. Because if not, then after a while, then you realize no one has called for help while you're trying to help them, and then now there's more time delayed. And even though naloxone is great and it is it saves time, right? It buys some time for our first responders to get there. We don't want to push that longer than we need to. So of course we call 911, let them know where we're at, put them on the speakerphone, and then go on to the next steps. Also, this is a recovery position. So let's say if I am by myself, or I don't know, I have to leave the person for any instance, we will want to put them in this recovery position, which is very helpful even after we give them naloxone. And if they are on the floor, right, we can put them in this position just in case they end up vomiting, right? It reduces the possibility of them, choking on it. So that's very important. We can go to the next slide. Oh, so with the recovery position, I heard one of our trainers, and I love listening to our trainers. They said, "Ladies, this is just how we sleep at night." So if you know what that feels like, this is the position we want to put them in, and it's true. It's true. Next slide. So we do want to give 2 rescue breaths, right? So what that looks like, if we can't put the person on their back, we will want to tilt their head back, pinch nose, and then do 1 breath into their airway. And then next step, you can skip the video.
For rescue breathing, place the person on their back. Place the face shield over the person.
Awesome. Which very simple to do our rescue breaths. If there's one thing that we know how to do is we could breathe for ourselves, so we could breathe for others. And I don't know if you guys noticed, we didn't have to do the chest compressions there. I mean, 911 might walk us through that depending on the situation, but we just want to, be mindful of that. So the next step would be to take our naloxone and to administer it. So we want to put the, I don't have it here, unfortunately. We want to grab the nasal spray and place it into their nostril, and we will do one firm push, and you will hear a click from the plunger, and it dispenses into the nostril. The person does not have to be breathing for it to take effect, right? Because a lot of times the person's probably not breathing. We have our body's awesome, and we have our mucous membranes happening here, and it gets to where it needs to go. So that's something that's nice to know, that they don't have to be breathing, but it is helpful if they are. I mean, either way, it's going to do its job. So we want to wait up to 1 to 3 minutes for it to take effect. And while we're waiting, if they're not breathing, then of course we're going to do the rescue breaths. If they are breathing, we want to pay attention and see, hey, is the shallow breathing now coming a little bit more stronger? Are they able to breathe it more on their own? We do not have to wait for that person to physically get up and start talking with us. I feel like there's this misconception that we need to give 4 to 5 naloxone doses back to back, but it's really important just to wait that a lot of time in between, because give the Narcan's job to do what it needs to do. And my apologies, Narcan is the brand name. Naloxone is the medication. So sometimes I interchange. So just in case anyone's confused, Narcan is naloxone. Naloxone is Narcan. Next slide. Yep. And then everything that I just said right here, if they're not breathing on their own, then we do want to continue with the rescue breathing. You could go to the next slide. So naloxone, is naloxone free? We can get naloxone at no cost at your community service board or your local health department. There are a lot of CHRs, comprehensive harm reduction sites, that go around and give naloxone. There are, especially here in Richmond, there's a lot of places that they just have vans out there, and they're like, hey, today's the day at this time, we're going to give you naloxone. So there are options to get no cost naloxone. You could also get it at your local pharmacy or retailer, right? And that is awesome because it wasn't over the counter before. The question here, do I need a prescription? It's no longer required, which is great. So that's why we could just buy it over the counter. Before it was over the counter, the cost of it was about $140. And now for a box of 2, it's about between $40 to $50, which could feel kind of steep for some, which is totally understandable, but there are options to get it at no cost. But however, I believe if we have one on our person, or at least in our home, or maybe one for the floor of the office, right, that will be very helpful. So that's different ways that we can get it. Also, most importantly, when it comes to naloxone, I am really big about people advocating for themselves. So a lot of the times, unfortunately, people who end up with substance use disorders, it was because of a prescription they were prescribed, right? So, and then, or accidental overdoses from the prescription because I forgot I took this much, right? And then you end up overdosing. So just ask for naloxone. If they say, hey, I'm gonna give you this opioid, right? Just say, okay, can you prescribe me naloxone as well to go along with it? A lot of the providers kind of do that anyways, but if they don't, things get busy, life, gets routine. Ask, hey, can I get that along with this? And it shouldn't be an issue, because it is going with an opioid they are prescribing. Also, because a lot of times we're taking it home, we don't know whose hands are going to be on it, on the opioid. So it could be your grandchild or kid or someone else. So you just want to be prepared to have that naloxone handy. A lot of people say, oh, I don't need naloxone, or who would be the target audience for naloxone? I believe it should be in everybody's first aid kit, or like I said before, in the office floors, like on the AED kits around there next to it. If we have one in the restaurant or whatnot where people are all around, even if we don't have it on our person, it would be helpful to have, because we just don't know who might be going through, a substance opioid use disorder, or maybe again accidental, right? A lot of times, the age range right now, for most fatalities when it comes to opioid overdoses, excuse me if I'm wrong, is between 35 and 55. And a lot of people feel like, hey, it's the teens. Obviously, we want to, teach them as well, but also look out for our partners, right? Our peers is very important, because we don't know what's going on in their lives. So it's just helpful to have. Next
Hey,
slide.
Tiana, just a couple of questions that sometimes
Yeah.
come up is, if I'm a law enforcement officer, and I have a intranasal naloxone kit, the kit comes with 2 doses in it, 2 of those plungers.
Mhm.
What do I need to be thinking about as far as not, about storing it, that kind of thing, so it doesn't get deactivated through the
Yeah.
heat or cold?
So I believe this is if as officers carrying on your person, this would be a Stephanie question to answer. Steph?
We provide carrying cases for law enforcement so that they can protect their naloxone, so they can always have it on their person. But I will go into that, and
Okay.
they're free. That's the other thing; they're free.
Yeah.
Another comment that popped up that I think is relevant to what Tiana was just telling us is that individual people, and this is from Carolyn Lemire at the Virginia Department of Health. She's the
Yes.
naloxone
We love
program manager, and she's just a reminder that individuals can get no-cost naloxone from their community service board or the local health department, but organizations like police departments, sheriff's offices, and other organizations contact VDH to find out about how they can get naloxone, and the email address to reach out to is opioidreversal@vdh.virginia.gov.
Thank you, Carolyn. Yeah, I email that all the time. I know I get on Carolyn's nerves. I say, hey, can we please help so and so? But yeah, that's my portion. And this next portion is for Stephanie. So that law enforcement question, perfect timing.
All right, and now we have Stephanie with the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police.
All right. Hey, everyone. So I'm just going to go over this real quick, what the First Responders Naloxone Program is, and so a few sections of the code. So back in 2019, in 2013, the DBHDS created created the Revive program, and in 2019 they partnered with the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police to get more first responder agencies participating in this program. So what the program is to address the opioid epidemic and equip first responders to safely and effectively respond to opioid overdose emergencies. DBHDS, the Virginia Department of Health, and the VACP, we have a small team that we work very closely with. We have Tiana Vazques and Malcolm King at DBHDS, Carolyn Lemire and Gretchen Dunn at VDH. And then there's me here at the VACP. So we're a close team. We work together. So we want to make sure that if you don't qualify for one program, then we see what other program you work for. You do qualify for. Also, VDH does have a partner program. So if you don't qualify for any of the programs to receive free naloxone, they do provide naloxone at a discounted price. So there is, you can reach out to VDH at the opioid reversal email to get more information on that. But through the First Responders Naloxone program, we do provide a free naloxone, carrying cases, wall mounts, fentanyl test strips. And then we also provide training free. We conduct live monthly virtual train the trainers, and you can go on to our website and check on our calendar for the next upcoming trainings. And that way you can manage the trainings within your agency. Agencies that are eligible to receive resources under this grant program are law enforcement agencies, jails, correctional facilities, probation and parole, juvenile justice, both state and local, emergency communications, dispatch, the law enforcement and rangers divisions of forestry and state parks, fire departments, EMS, and rescue squads. Next slide, please. So this section of the code just talks about professional use by practitioners, and this section just says that you can carry and administer naloxone. So this section next talks about medical personnel, first responders, school nurses, firefighters, employees of correctional facilities, local health departments. Next slide. And section Y, any person who, this is continuing on the same section that says that any person who's acting on behalf of an organization that provides services to individuals, such as homeless services or drug treatment centers, they're also allowed through the code to carry and administer naloxone. And then section Z says anybody who is not otherwise authorized to carry and administer is allowed to carry and administer. So this opens it up pretty much to everyone in the Commonwealth of Virginia to be able to carry and administer naloxone to reverse an opioid overdose emergency. Okay, next slide. And now we get into safe reporting law. So this is so that people can report an overdose without feeling like they're at risk of being arrested. So they won't. So they're not subject to arrest or prosecution for the unlawful purchase, possession, or consumption of alcohol, marijuana, possession of controlled substance or controlled paraphernalia, or intoxication in public, if they are seeking emergency medical services, attention for themselves or someone else, or they're rendering emergency care or assistance while somebody else runs and gets help. There are a few things that they have to do, and that is one, they have to remain at the scene of the overdose or an alternate location. So if they went along to the emergency room with EMS, they do need to wait around until law enforcement arrives. When the law enforcement arrives, they do have to identify themselves. That is required. And any evidence that was obtained as a result of the individual seeking this emergency medical care is exempt. Now, that is only to those things listed there. So if they are carrying illegal weapons or have or anything else like that, that does not cover them for anything like that. And this it doesn't apply if the emergency medical attention was sought or obtained during the execution of a search warrant or during the conduct of a lawful search or lawful arrest. So those are things just for people to be aware of. Next slide. Effective July 1, there is an update to this amendment to this section of the code, and there's two updates to this. One is it's adding in the act of sexual violence. So if somebody was the victim of or is reporting somebody else to be a victim of sexual violence, they're also safe for those for marijuana, substances, paraphernalia, intoxication in public. And that only applies to the person who is either the victim or getting help for the victim. It does not apply to the individual who may have committed the act. And then also added on to safe reporting law is Section E, and that if the person that happens to be is on bail, probation, furlough, supervised release, suspended sentence, or parole, they will not have that revoked they're also protected under this section of the code. So those two things that's effective July 1. The paraphernalia exception, currently, controlled paraphernalia does not include narcotic testing products, such as fentanyl testing strips. Whether they're used or not used, they are not included as paraphernalia. And effective July 1, that is extended to all drug checking products, because there are other types of testing strips to check for benzodiazepine and other types of dangerous substances. So whether they're used or not used, those are now an exception created in paraphernalia law. And that is it. What questions does anybody have?
Okay, so for our attendees, again, if you have a question, please feel free to type it into the question and answer, the Q&A feature. We do have a comment and a question that was posted that says that the Philadelphia Health Department just put out a great document on naloxone dosing to avoid precipitated withdrawal. And the question is, does Virginia have anything similar? And the person included a link to this resource, so I will, I'm gonna try to put that into the chat. But while I'm doing that, any
Yeah,
any
I
thoughts
was
from our,
able, yeah, I was able to open up that link. Great link. Uh, our our doses are 4 milligrams. There are 8 which are available, right? However, the general consensus is if we use our 4 milligram, right, and wait, and then use another dose, we want to see how that works out. And they have done stronger the 8 because fentanyl is so potent, right? And sometimes we just don't know how much anyone has in their system. However, to be safe, because opioid withdrawal, right? Again, like I mentioned before, if someone is dependent on opioids, the acute withdrawal symptoms will be intense. A lot of people are scared because they're not sure. Well, I don't want them to be vomiting or sweats and all that stuff hurting. However, that as long as I don't mind if they're alive, right? So I feel like the 4 milligram, that's what we should stick with. There are certain, and my apologies, Carolyn, for not having you here. If Carolyn wants to jump in on that too, she's the expert on that when it comes to the 8 milligram. Is there are some people that do keep that on hand, but just because of the high risk community they might be surrounded around, right? And they are monitored, they monitor that themselves. But the 4 milligram is the general of what we give out, and that's what you get over the counter and at no cost.
And just to add on to that, although we do not have a specific document that discusses this, this is something that is discussed during the training. So both in the first responder training and the lay rescue training, we do discuss reactions and what to expect and how to deal with that. So that is something that we do discuss during the trainings.
yeah, which is a great point because what Tiana shared with us today is supposed to be an overview, but it's not, is not the actual Revive training class. So it's really not very complicated, and we encourage people to take the training, but today's webinar is intended to provide, you know, general overview and respond to the myths versus the realities. So another question that just popped up, and I'm not sure if, well, we'll see if we're able to answer this one. I'm not sure. It's from one of our attendees who says, can you please speak to studies that have shown success with naloxone use for heart attacks? This is a new one for me. I'm not aware of any such thing.
I've heard, but no, yeah, this is pretty new. I can't speak to that.
Yeah,
Okay.
our expertise is on dealing with opioid overdoses,
Yeah.
not with heart attacks. So we wouldn't be able to answer that. So sorry.
And
All I can say in regards to heart attacks or anything, again, as I mentioned, if we're unsure if it's an opioid overdose and we administered naloxone to someone, and then it turned out after emergency services come and they say, oh, it was a heart attack, not or a stroke or something else, naloxone doesn't cause any harm. So that's all I can say in regards to that.
Okay, let me just throw it out. One last opportunity for our attendees. Well, first of all, thank you for joining. And just a reminder, we'll be sending out an email to everyone who is registered, whether they attended or not, with links to the recording and a link to the presentation. But if there's any questions anybody would like to include in the Q&A, we have just a couple minutes left that we can respond to those, and not seeing any pop up. If you would like to reach out to the Opioid Abatement Authority, please send us an email at info@voaa.us. You can visit our website at voaa.us. and, sign up for our news blast, and you'll get more information about additional upcoming episodes of the Abatement Academy. I'd like to conclude by thanking our panelists today, Tim Spencer, Tiana Vazques, and Stephanie Diaz for joining us. Great presentation, very helpful. And we'll finish 5 minutes early. And you guys all have my permission to go to lunch now, 5 minutes early. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.